everyone. This week we are focusing on second language acquisition and the theories that are behind this field. So the goal of this week is that you will understand the theoretical and historical background in second language learning. You will understand that there are theorists like Chomsky who are innatists, the role of behaviorism and second language acquisition. I want you to be exposed to Krashen's 5 hypotheses, understand the role of affect and input, and the implications of these theories on instruction. The field of second language acquisition is informed by many different fields. Of course, it's informed by linguistics, but it's also informed by sociology, anthropology, cultural theories, psychology, and even biology. The first theories around language acquisition come from behaviorism, and Skinner's work informs this. Behaviorism says that language is learned from experience. So as a child is around their parents, when they babble and coo, the parents give positive and negative reinforcement, and this affects how they learn language. The focus is on form, not output. So behaviorists are concerned with proper grammar. As we move to innatist and nativist, we think of Chomsky. Chomsky, among other theorists, have this idea called universal grammar, that humans are hardwired to learn grammar and language is innate. It's not that we're a blank slate, that we're completely dependent on our parents' positive and negative reinforcement, but inside our brains, there is a structure already set up for us to learn grammar. And they use this case of the wugs, and you can go to the YouTube link to see more about it. But here's some examples. They will use a word with children that they've never seen before, and they'll say, this is a wug. And when they show the two pictures, they'll say, what are these? And invariably, children will say, these are wugs. They will apply the plural S ending. And then they will look at verbs, and they'll say, this is a man who knows how to rick. He is ricking. And children will say, what did he do yesterday? Yesterday, he ricked. They will put the regular ed ending on a verb. Even though they don't know what this word is, they will apply the grammar rule innately. Again, they'll do it with possessives. Now there are two wugs. They both own hats. Whose hats are they? They are the, children will say, wugs' hats. So we have the innatist, like Chomsky, and then the naturalist approach includes Krashen's hypotheses. Krashen looks at acquisition versus learning. He also has a monitor hypothesis, a natural order hypothesis, input hypothesis, and affective filter hypothesis. With acquisition versus learning, Krashen says that we acquire language when we're able to own it, when we can use it in a real setting. It may not be perfect. It may not be proper grammar, but we're able to use it to communicate. And that this is a subconscious and intuitive construction of language. It is not a formal rules learning classroom setting. Acquisition happens at the point where communication needs to occur. And that fluency in a second language comes from what we acquire, not what we learn or are taught. Krashen would say that learning language is a conscious process, and it's focused on form, so focused on grammar, the rules, and the process of forming language. Krashen would say that learning language in a formal setting does not necessarily lead to us being competent to use language in real life situations. For the monitor model, Krashen does say that learning has a role. The only role of learning is to monitor our output. Output refers to the speech or writing we produce. So if you've ever been in a second language situation, you know when you are about to let that word out of your mouth in a second language, you are thinking about it, double checking one last time before it comes out of your mouth, is it correct or not? So this is monitoring our production, our output. Krashen also talks about a natural order of how language happens. The elements of language or language rules are acquired in a predictable order. And we know that children go through a silent period at first when they come and know no language at all. So they are listening actively, they are sponging up all kinds of information, but they may not be producing anything. And that's that silent period. But they are starting to understand. Following understanding, they begin to speak a little bit. And then later they will start doing more reading and writing that are more complex. Also, with the natural order hypothesis is a sequence of grammatical structures that happen, that plurals happen first. Copula means when we use the verb to be to connect one thing equal to another thing. I am a professor. Then articles like a, an, and the, irregular past tense, third person, and possessives. The affective filter hypothesis is probably the most important hypothesis. We know that our students may come from situations that have left them with some anxiety, and then coming into our classrooms when they don't understand everything can make them anxious. When you have emotions that cause you to feel anxious or have low self-esteem, low motivation, be fearful, it's harder to acquire language. You can think of the Charlie Brown example of where the children hear the adults speaking, but the adults just sound like wah, wah, wah. The children don't understand anything. It's not comprehensible. So it is our role as educators to do what we can to make the input comprehensible and at the same time help our students to have reduced anxiety, increase their self-esteem, increase motivation, and reduce their fear. Another theory that heavily influences the field of second language acquisition is sociocultural theory. And you probably have heard about Lev Vygotsky and other courses. This theory, in its simplest form, believes that first and second language acquisition stresses the integration of social, cultural, and biological influences. So when we are in sociocultural settings, that gives us the opportunity to learn language. And there's another YouTube clip here that gives you some examples. When we have interactive sociocultural settings, we have context that helps us to learn what the language is that we need to acquire. When we try to acquire language outside of context, it is very hard to hold on to it. As a classroom teacher, things that you can do to increase comprehensible input for your students are to monitor how you speak. As English speakers, we feel comfortable with our speech, so we don't have to think about it, and we can talk really fast. But when we talk really fast, no one understands us. Or at least very few people understand us. So it's important to slow down how we speak and to give our students wait time. Give them time to process what you've said. Pause and check for comprehension. Are their eyes glazed over because they don't understand? Does it sound like you just were a machine gun of syllables with no meaning? Or did you slow down, give pauses, look to see if they understood? That makes a huge difference. As I mentioned before, we need to respect the silent period. We need to be aware of idioms. Our learners want to know what they mean, but even the expression, "what's up?" They may be looking at the ceiling if you say that. We have to explain what idioms are to our students. When you use non-linguistic cues such as images and video, that helps students to, again, have more context, and you can recast or reword what a student says, not to make them feel bad by correcting them, but by giving them a model of language that they're just ready for. So again, when we think of Vygotsky, we think of that I+1. I know what I'm ready for, and I'm going to do just a little bit more. That can be challenging when you have a class of 30 students and they're all at different I+1s. But you need to do the best you can realistically to give them just a little bit more than they're comfortable with now, a little bit more than they're ready for, to help them increase their acquisition. Other important strategies include providing instructions both in writing and speaking. While speaking comes first, it is fleeting. As soon as you say it, it's gone. When you provide instructions in writing also, that helps students to be able to come back to it, and they can spend more time figuring out what you want to say. And just like for all students, feedback is very important, both written feedback and spoken. So for this week, we've talked about these theories. What's important is we need to help provide authentic materials to students that are level appropriate, not grade appropriate. You can decide what you think about the theories. Is language best learned implicitly? You do need to modify your speech and communication to ensure that comprehension happens. Just because you cover material does not mean that students are able to learn it. Watch for your students' readiness to move out of silent period into initial production. Help them test the waters in safe spaces, probably with a partner or a small group. Probably not in front of the whole class to start with. Younger learners do not need explicit grammar instruction. They will acquire that grammar over time. Older learners they have missed out on the grammar instruction that first language learners have experienced. So they do need some explicit grammar instruction. And like we said before, create classrooms that lower the affective filter. Well, that wraps up this week. Thank you.